Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you, I have another Sprocket Community Steel video. And today's first vehicle I am featuring is the ISU-152 by Generic Pub. This is a 47-ton turretless tank destroyer based on the IS-2, and it has a 152mm main gun with 127.2 millimeters of penetration. It is for the mid-war period. And that being said, it looks pretty dang close to an ISU-152. Actually, while I was at it, I grabbed a copy of this for my personal collection of vehicles, as well as modified a version to be an ISU-122. So, actually not a bad vehicle. And, while it's not performing the best here right now, that's because I'm trying to fire APHE at a TOG, and the TOG's turret armor is pretty tough here, so not going to go too well for me. And unfortunately, I got stuck on a tree because I'm old and shit, and I'm gonna die. Yeah, as you can see, feels bad, man. The next is the M1 Abrams ST from T-Rex 2040. Yes, he's made another M1 Abrams, although this rendition of the M1 Abrams is much better than his previous rendition, and this weighs in at 81.26 tons, so quite a bit of weight. He doesn't have the 120mm main gun on it, though. It's actually got the 105mm main gun. And when it comes to armor and mobility, this thing is actually rather amazing. It's got really good mobility, really good armor. Now, for those of you who don't know, I didn't download the logos. I don't, as an FYI, folks, I don't plan on downloading decals because I don't necessarily keep all these vehicles for my own personal collection of stuff in my Sprocket game. And I don't feel like constantly have to go through and deleting decals just so I could show vehicles that I may or may not keep. But here we go. We're going to engage actually, these are some Churchill. I believe these are Churchill 3s I'm engaging. They're my Churchill 3s. And I am actually struggling a little bit. I was actually quite surprised of how well the Churchill 3's hull and turret was holding up to the M1 Abrams here, which is kind of the unfortunate thing of only having AP and APHE. If this actually had the Sabo rounds, those Sabo rounds would cut right through my Churchill tanks, hands down. But armor mobility wise, it maneuvers pretty well, and the accuracy is actually not bad up until, I don't know, the gunnery sights started bouncing up and down like crazy. I don't know. And the next vehicle I have here is the Fitchell 1PZ from German Train. And this is his 6-ton light tank. It's got a 21mm main gun with only 22mm of penetration. It is actually for the interwar period. That being said, while the penetration on the vehicle is nothing to write home to mom about, and actually from what I can tell, the armor is not very good either, it does maneuver quite well, and well, it's an interwar tank, so more or less it's supposed to be cheap. And you know, kind of there's parts of it that reminds me of the Panzer I, Panzer II, probably more towards the Panzer I, if you will. But it's not a bad looking vehicle, and it's nice to see that German Train does build legit tanks from time to time. Unfortunately, somehow I kind of got it stuck here in a rut because I'm old and shit and Sprocket mechanics. Let's move on to the next one. The next one is the Centurion Mark V from Nathan the Dummy. And this really reminds me actually of the Tier 8 Premium Centurion Mark V that is in World of Tanks. It weighs in at 41 tons and actually does have the 84mm main gun. Mobility is rather decent. It's not the most mobile thing I've ever drove, but for a more medium main battle tank, mobility is actually rather decent. The penetration's pretty good. Doesn't really struggle up against other vehicles. As you can see there, I just kind of cut right through that KV2, no problem. We got some N36 Jacksons. Now the gunnery site location was a little bit hard to deal with, so that can be a little bit tricky, but I do get the gun to work at times, so not all bad. It's just mostly on me, if anything else. And this is actually for the late wars. You can see here, running Taiga with it, going up against some M36 Jacksons. And the armor's actually holding up. It's more or less when this thing is hit from the front arc and you're hauled down, there's not really too much that can penetrate this. I'm sure something with a ridiculous amount of penetration will go through it. But for the vehicles that I have in my game, yeah, this thing's more than a match for those. The next vehicle I have here is the early war KV-1 from Dario XN. And this is his 47-ton KV-1, folks. And it is armed with the 76mm gun. As you can tell, it's got the shorter barrel. And this is honestly a really good rendition of the KV-1. Actually, his rendition of the KV-1 ended up replacing my KV-1 and my KV-2. And I ended up just redesigning the turret for use as a KV-2. But yeah, rather good looking vehicle. I kind of wonder if he did a KV-1S. I didn't see one yet, but never know. Maybe down the road he'll do a KV-1S. Penetration's not bad for being an early war vehicle with a 76mm main gun. Understand that I actually have 50mm main guns. It's got more penetration than even the 76 here, but well, there's, you know, it's kind of the caveats of how you play with the shell length, the barrel length, and all that different type of stuff, and has less to do with the caliber. Although I do believe caliber does have a little bit of a you know, weigh in on it, because it's easier to get more penetration, I'm finding, with like a 50mm or a 57mm at the early war period than say a 76mm. You start getting some pretty ridiculous shell lengths, which increases the reload. Mobility wise, the tank is really good. Armor wise, for early war periods, the armor is amazing. When you get to your later war periods, especially mid-war, the armor starts becoming lackluster, which was actually an issue with the real KV-1, so not all bad there. And finally, we got a flak wagon. This is the FMU-R Zik 100 from Substep. Substep, for the 100th time. We really got to work on your names, buddy. We really got to work on these names. But this is his 19-ton anti-air vehicle, if you will. It's pretty much got a flat, you know, it's like a flatbed truck with tracks, a plow, and an anti-aircraft gun. And I think it looks rather cool. He does some really cool projects, especially stuff that seems like could have been, but may have not necessarily was. And they definitely all fulfill certain roles. I seen recently he worked on an artillery piece that was really cool. But this is for the mid-war. And, well, it does really good here against my M3A1 Stuarts, but that's nothing to write home to mom about. You know, this is a 100mm gun shooting armor piercing, while those are just really thin-skinned light tanks. And the mobility on this vehicle is rather awesome. The armor, well, the armor's pretty laughable, but it is just a truck. Now, the armor's actually probably provides enough protection from, say, a 20mm cannon, based on how much penetration you got out of that 20mm cannon. But once you start getting up against 37mm main guns, those 37s actually do work pretty effectively against this vehicle. That being said, you can clearly see that it's not really an armored vehicle. It's your typical AA type vehicle. Not heavily armored, fairly mobile, and, you know, has some type of anti-aircraft firepower per se. And right now I am trying to blast away at some Tiger tanks here, which I'm kind of struggling because, well, I'm old and shit. I like how he strapped the fuel barrels there on the side. When I zoom out again, look at the rear and you'll see 2 fuel barrels, one on each side. So very, very Soviet Russia of him to have external fuel tanks on an anti-air vehicle, because I guess it needed it. I don't know. There we go. Finally got a Tiger tank. Yay! That's alright, because shortly after this, Tiger tank gets me. But anyway, folks, there it is. Another episode of Community Steel. Hopefully y'all enjoyed seeing the projects that I felt like airing today. And, yeah, have yourself a wonderful day.